are you today?
Good. What about you?
I'm good, thanks.
We're good.
You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
How would you like to do it today? Do you want to give us an update about any process?
I'd like to give you an update, definitely. Let's do that. So today's kind of an exciting day for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's the fiscal cutoff for legislation in what's called the House of Origin. So if it's a House bill, it's still in the House, and that means it's the House of Origin. And so the fiscal committees today have to get the House of Origin bills out that have a fiscal impact. And so
can I, fiscal might be a word that some people don't know, so I just want to interrupt you briefly. And fiscal is related to money, right? So bills that cost the state money.
That's right. So any of the legislation that they're looking at has some kind of a cost associated with it. And they have to pass those bills understanding where they are in their budget process, because ultimately they'll have to pass a budget by the end of session. So today's a big cutoff. The budget committees are places where bills die often. And I can't even count how many bills I've had die there and have to try again until you can get something out of there. So it's a big day also because we are at the halfway point of our 60-day legislative session. And we started on January 8th. This is day 30, and the end of the day marks the halfway point because we count Saturdays and Sundays. The legislature works by calendar. So every year they adopt a calendar. They're given so many days to consider policy bills in the House of Origin, and then budget bills in the House of Origin. And then once the ones that are passed are done, they pass to the other side. So House bills goes to the Senate, Senate bills go to the House, and then we start the process all over again with a smaller number of bills that are still alive at that point. So that's good for all of us that have been had way too many bills this session, but also good for the process because it gives a chance for everything to be vetted through good policy committees and good budget committees and make recommendations to the other side as they go through. So just to give you an example of what's happening today, the Ways and Means Committee, that's the Senate Budget Committee, the House Appropriations Committee, the House Budget Committee, House Finance Committee, the House Revenue Committee, and both the Transportation Committees are meeting today to meet that deadline to get their bills done. And this is, I'm going to give you an example of what one of the committees has going for them today. This is the Senate Ways and Means agenda. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's just a long, long list of bills. It's on both sides. There are 68 bills that are going to be exec today out of the Ways and Means Committee, 68 of them. So it's just very, very busy. Members were working late last night on amendments and got an early start this morning. So it's, I'll tell you, it's a little bit crazy, and there will be a lot of joy tonight when things are either passed or dead, depending on your position on any particular piece of legislation. So let's talk a little bit about the net neutrality bill. House Bill 2282 is in the Appropriations Committee today. It had a public hearing on Saturday, along with 40 other odd bills that the committee looked at. And the bill has a good chance of coming out in executive session today. And let me tell you why. When the bill passed out of the Technology Committee, I don't remember if we talked about this before or not, but we had a good vote. We had 15 yes votes and 2 no votes. And those votes, one had no recommendation and the other one was a do not pass. So 15-2 out of a big committee is a pretty good vote count. And remember, this bill has 52 co-sponsors, and there's only 98 members in the House. So in terms of getting it through the House, we're in a pretty good position. But what helped it a lot is being sent to appropriation. You might recall that the original fiscal, the budget amount that was expected to be needed to make this bill law was almost $1 million. And that was the requirement that the Utilities and Transportation Committee set up a process for dealing with the complaints that would come through should the companies not follow the new net neutrality rules. So that was removed from the bill by the committee before it was sent to appropriations. And it took away that cost to the budget. So right now, the budget impact of 2282 is actually determined to be zero. The Attorney General's office has said it's indeterminate what their budget budget needs might be, because they don't know if they're going to get cases where there's net neutrality not happening in particular areas. Secondly, the UTC was taken out of it, so they don't have a role. And the Treasurer's office says it doesn't cost them anything to set up the account. So we are down to zero, giving this bill a very, very good chance of getting out of committee this afternoon.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I think you said the UTC? Is that what you said? I don't know what that is, so I'm guessing students might not know what that is either. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. That's a regulatory body that's it's a commission, and what their role is to make sure that the utilities like the telephone companies or transportation companies like trucking companies are all following the rules of the road or the rules of telephone service in our state. That's their role. And what they do is they create rules that will make sure that the safety and the well-being of the citizens of Washington is followed. In 2282, the UTC was required to create rules around complaints that could be filed against companies like Comcast or CenturyLink around net neutrality. So if there was something that was impeding your ability to have full access to the net, you could complain to the UTC. They took that out of the bill and left that responsibility with the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office. That's already in existence. They already have rules around consumer protection in our state. You are consumers anytime you buy something. So if you're buying access to the internet, they can protect your rights as a consumer. But it doesn't cost anything additionally. And should a whole bunch of cases come in, they might need some extra help from the state. But they can't determine that at this point. And our hope is that all of the companies will follow the rules. So the fiscal note has dropped basically zero. And that's why it bodes well in the Appropriations Committee this afternoon. Those budget committees are the hardest committees to get your bills out of. And that's why I'm pleased that they've been able to whittle it down. It's one of the biggest jobs as a lobbyist that I've had to engage in, and that is, how do we get the fiscal note, the funding requirement that the agencies expect they need, down to a smaller amount or to zero in some fashion, and still be able to make sure that the bill gets done. So that's the goal around that.
Yeah, cool.
Good news.
Thank you. Should we open it up to questions now? Or do you have was there more? I didn't want to cut you off. Was there more to update?
I was going to say that if there's a way to introduce your policy and have it go through a policy committee without a budget attached to it, you're in much better shape. And really strategically, that's what we try to do. Use existing funds or find outside sources and not rely on.
All right. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So everybody get that right? Because it was going to cost $1 million, and so legislators would have been less likely to vote for it if it cost that much money, but they figured out a way to say, actually, it won't cost anything at all. Right? So
$1 million or
it would have been $1 million, correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, the $1 million would have been used to like help people if companies were messing with the internet. If they're trying to protect net neutrality, but then Comcast or somebody is still doing something illegal, like we as people who use the internet would have to have a way to like, fight back against that, complain, make sure that the company's not breaking the law, right? So that $1 million would have been used for that, but they're using something that already exists. The Consumer Protection Agency, it already exists, so they're like, this won't actually cost anything else because it already exists. Make sense? Yeah. Did I summarize that right?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool. Let's have some questions. Who wants to ask the question first? Nick, come on over.
Ya conté.
Oh,
All right, hi, I am Nick. So my question is, what's the other side's argument for net neutrality?
Say a lot of.
Nick, you gotta tell us too. Let's say it loud so we can.
All right, I'll just go over here then. All right, so my question is, what's the other side's argument for net neutrality? And I have a follow-up question, which is, what is our goal, to change their minds, or is it to get their votes?
The opposition to the legislation has been really around, is it the state's role to make this decision? And they're arguing that it's the federal government's responsibility to protect net neutrality of the state. But as you know, the Communications Commission has already decided that they are not going to protect net neutrality. And as a result, this is why the state has stepped in and said, well, we're going to do it for the people of Washington. The federal government doesn't do it themselves. And I think that the idea is that net neutrality is about what? Is it about money making, or is it about access? And the argument that proponents of net neutrality make is that the reason why it's been changed at the federal level, so there's not that net neutrality protection, is because there are very big companies who already make a lot of money who want to make more. And that would mean we pay higher amounts to have access to the net, higher amounts for the speed, even though we do that to some extent already now. So those are the arguments that we're making in opposition to that argument. Did that answer your follow-up?
Kind of.
I think his follow-up question was like, the people who are sponsoring this bill, are they really worried about changing anybody's minds who oppose it, or do they just want to like win the vote, and then like the people who oppose it just have to deal with it?
I think that the companies are pretty entrenched in their position, and they liked the fact that net neutrality was removed at the federal level. So there are not efforts to try to engage them in the conversation or the debate, because they've been pretty set in their position. I think if there's any persuasion that's taking place, it's between legislators. There are still a handful, not a lot, but there are still a handful who feel that it should be done by the federal government, or these companies should work in a free market and they should be able to do what they please in that free market. So legislators are having conversation with their colleagues to see if they can persuade them. But it appears that the votes are there if they can bring the bill to the floor.
All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Jeffrey's on his way up.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
That's good. So my question was, I know it's hard for some bills to be passed in fiscal committees. Fiscal committees. I thought it was physical. Fiscal committees. What other committees is it hard to get passed through? If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think that sometimes the hardest committees are the budget, but I think that there are others that can get challenging. Number one is a rules committee. The rules committee actually makes decisions about what will be heard on the floor so that the entire body gets to vote. And there's a lot of political decision making that can occur at that level. So once a bill gets to the rules committee, you have the leadership of the Democrats and the leadership of the Republicans serving on that committee, making decisions about what comes to the floor. They're going to look at those bills and they're going to say, do I want, they're called caucuses, Democratic caucus, Republican caucus. Do I want my caucus to take a vote on this bill? And let me give you an example. Gun rights. Right now, very hot topic in Olympia. Should people be limited in their ability to buy certain things for their guns? And legislators, I was told this morning, one legislator received 1,200 email messages over the weekend about these gun bills that are being considered. There is a political decision that's taking place at that Rules Committee level, where the leadership's going to say, I thought members who are from rural districts where guns might be more popular, or districts where hunting occurs a lot, say in Eastern Washington, and I want them to vote in a way that is going to make sure they're reelected. So they either want them to vote in a certain way, and they're going to trade votes with the other caucus, or they're going to say, I really don't want my member to have to take a vote on that, or I have too many members that could be impacted with a vote on that. And so we're just not going to bring the bill to the floor for a vote. It got through committee, the policy committee, it got through the financial committee, the fiscal committee, got all the way to rules, but the leadership can sit on it, and then the bill won't come out, and then it'll be dead for the session.
Okay.
Complicated, but there are the political decisions that get made too.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Zach's going to come over and ask a question. I have a follow-up to Jeffrey's, actually. Do the personalities of the committee chair people play much of a role? Like, are there chair people who are just cantankerous and cranky, and that makes it less likely that things are going to move forward in the committee? Does that play a role at all?
It can. We've had members that have been unwilling to hear a particular issue, and despite the fact that the entire committee wants to hear it, they just are like a little cantankerous and just willing to go there. And others who might be opposed to a bill but bring it up just for the good process of allowing the public and the legislators to have some input into a particular policy issue. But it does matter. I mean, you might get a legislator who's very gifted at organization and grasping the underlying law impacts with a bill and be able to get through a whole bunch of legislation, and others who just find it difficult and challenging to organize the committee and make it as effective as it could be. So it depends on personalities, it depends on the political makeup, it depends on how the committee members get along, the competency of the staff, and how challenging the issues are that are before them. So it's very complicated. And you make your decisions based on all of those aspects of a particular committee.
Hello. My question doesn't necessarily have to do with net neutrality. It's kind of more of a general question, but how much influence does the public have on the likelihood of a bill passing? So basically, if there's a bill that I want to see passed, what can I do to help in that process?
You know, I've seen situations where the public has weighed in and bills still get passed in the opposite direction. But I've also seen overwhelming numbers of people come in and make a difference in how they present their positions and really how compelling the issue is. So sometimes bills are passed based on an anecdote, and it matters. As an example, there was a young child one time at a daycare that got caught in some slat lines and was suffocated. And so a bill was passed that made every child care that was licensed by the state of Washington change the size of the slats that were being used in their child care. Were there people opposed to it? Yes. Were there people supporting it? Overwhelming in response to the tragedy of this young toddler that was killed. So it depends on how compelling the issue is, whether there's a strong interest, and who's leading the committee in a number of different ways. So, but you as an individual can make a difference. And I tell advocates that it may not necessarily be that you're repeatedly sending messages in through the legislative hotline, but sometimes just a compelling handwritten letter, which is unique in this environment these days, can make a difference. You're really giving your personal opinion about a piece of legislation that they will read because it is unique. Instead, what they get now, where they get stacks of papers like this with telephone messages that say support 6522, the gun bill, or don't support the gun bill. And they just get stacks and stacks of paper, but there's really not much there that compels any consideration of the issue. So they just usually will count them, and you might get a canned response. But something that's a little more substantive help, I think. But there are different ways to do it. I always recommend, if you can, meet your legislators when they're not in session, so you can have more time with them and talk about any issues that you might want to raise with them. Secondly, I think talking to their aides directly by calling them on the telephone is a good way to communicate with the legislator. And then the writing. You can write email messages, you can call the hotline, and you can handwrite a letter. And like I said, it is so unique these days that it gets noticed. It does get noticed.
All right, thank you.
So if we were to spend some time potentially writing letters in support of net neutrality, should we only send those letters to their legislators, or would you suggest also sending it to the leader of the House of Representatives, or only their legislators? What would you say?
I do recommend sending it to the local legislators where you live. I also recommend sending it to the sponsors of the bill. And I think that sending it to leadership is a decision that I make depending on where we are in the process. So for example, we know that sometime this afternoon, House Bill 2282 will be coming out of the Appropriations Committee. At that time, it'll be referred to rules. And so what we'll want to do is send notes to Rules Committee members and the leadership. So the Speaker of the House and to the Republican caucus leader. And really the goal is to get it out of rules and onto the floor so that they can take a vote. And then once it's out of rules and on the calendar, we're sending messages to all the House members so that we can get it past the House and get it sent over to the Senate. So that's
you just answered my question, because I was basically going to ask you what happens when because you said today it's going to the Appropriation Committee.
It's in Appropriations, right? And
do you think we'll face any obstacles today?
I don't. And if you remember, and Jason knows how to bring the bill up, the front page of the bill, 2282. He can bring it up on the screen so you can see it. We're fortunate because there are 98 members in the House. So how many votes do we need to get it out of the House?
98 divided by 2 plus what?
11.
50.
50, that's right. So, and if you look at the bill, let's put the bill up. I just want you to see the front page of the bill.
She did that herself.
2280.
How'd she do that?
Thank you, Jason.
Good job, Jason. So if you look at the name, you see where it says sponsors?
Yeah.
There's 52 co-sponsors on this bill.
Uh-huh.
So my expectation when I see somebody has signed on to a bill is that they're going to vote for it. They better vote for it, or they better have a good reason why they changed their mind. So I think that bodes well for this piece of legislation getting out of the House. So we just got to get it past rules, and that's what we're doing. So this afternoon, it'll come out of appropriations, and then it'll be sent to rules, and then we want to get it onto the calendar and out of the house as soon as we can. So, and if you haven't had a chance to go through the legislative website, you can find all of this information right there, and it's kind of easy to click through. So, do you want to see how we got to the bill page again?
Sure, we can do that, and we'll spend some more time on that tomorrow too, but sure, if you want to show us that.
Can we back up and start over?
And actually, while you're getting that ready, if I could ask a follow-up question. When I printed this out earlier, there were not 50 sponsors. So can sponsors kind of join in later after the fact?
There's a process by which the members can sign on to the bill once it's been put on the bar. The bar is really just, it's a bar that sits in the House chambers. And once the bill is up on the counter there, members can go in and sign it. So they have, I think, 24, 48 hours. The House and the Senate have different rules around that. So they can sign on after the original bill's been put up there. So.
Thank you.
All right, so let's take a look at the website. We're going to start at the website is www.leg.wa.gov. And so so what you see on the screen right now is what you get as soon as you put that address in there. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a list of options, and it'll say bill information. You click on that, and then there's a little box to put the bill number. And you put 2282 into the box and hit search. And that's how you get the bill page for the net neutrality bill. And it's got all of the bills that have been under 2282. So it's got the original bill, and it's got the substitute bill that came out of the committee. It also has summary documents. So you'll see bill reports and things like that, a little digest. The bill analysis is up there. And then below that, you'll see the fiscal note. Sometimes it'll say pending, sometimes it'll say no fiscal note, and you'll have the opportunity to see how those agencies that are impacted by the bill determined what the cost would be to them. And that's how we came from having a almost $1 million fiscal note to, as you can see, 0, 0, zeros all the way through on that document. So just the bill page has everything. It'll tell you what the current status is. It'll tell you who voted for it in committee. Excuse me. It'll tell you. It'll show you what the amendments were, even those that weren't passed. So everything that you want to know about the legislation is right there. And as you can see, today the executive session in House Committee on Appropriations is started at 10. They're not close to being done. They too have a long list like this, so that's they're going to be pretty busy as well. So we expect them to get done sometime this week. One of the things I want all of you to give it a try. The legislative webpage, give it a try.
Yeah, we will spend some time tomorrow and Friday doing that.
Great.
One follow-up question. So the deadline for appropriations is today, assuming it gets out of that. Did you tell us what's the deadline just to get it out of the House?
February 14th.
14th? Okay.
So everything is only a 60-day session. And then as soon as it gets out of the House, it goes over to the Senate, and we start the committee process all over again. So if you do decide that you want to write a letter in support of the legislation, we can certainly use it on the Senate side and share that with the Senate members.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Already. Wow, that went fast.
Thank you very much, Donna.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.